Emma wiped her hands on her apron and looked at the clock on the restaurant wall. It was only 3 in the afternoon, but she already felt exhausted. The Golden Oak was busy today, filled with well-dressed customers eating expensive meals and drinking fine wine. The restaurant was famous in Manchester for its elegant atmosphere, with crystal glasses that sparkled under soft lights and white tablecloths that never had a single stain. But Emma could not enjoy the beauty around her. Her head hurt from working too many hours, and her feet ached in her old shoes. She had been a waitress at the Golden Oak for 3 years, and usually she loved her job. The customers were polite, the tips were good, and she felt proud to work at such a nice place. Today was different, though today everything felt wrong. Emma's problems had started piling up like dirty dishes in a sink. Her landlord had called her twice this week about late rent money. The electric bill sat unopened on her kitchen table because she was afraid to see how much she owed. Worst of all, her mother had called yesterday crying because she could not afford her heart medicine. Emma wanted to help, but she barely had enough money to buy food for herself. She had worked 6 days in a row without a single break, picking up extra shifts to try to make more money. Her manager had asked her to work again tomorrow, and Emma had said yes even though her body begged for rest. She felt angry at the world and angry at herself for being in this situation. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, making the restaurant feel warm and peaceful. But Emma felt cold inside. She watched the other waiters smiling and laughing with customers, and she wished she could feel happy like them. Instead, she felt bitter and tired. Then the front door opened, and James walked in. He was a black man, who looked to be in his 50s, with grey hair at his temples and kind eyes. He wore a simple brown jacket that had seen better days and shoes that were clean but old. He paused at the entrance, looking round the elegant restaurant with appreciation. Emma barely glanced at him as she grabbed a menu from the counter. She made a quick decision about James based on his appearance. His clothes were not expensive like the other customers. His jacket was worn, and his shoes looked like he had owned them for many years. Emma thought he probably worked at a factory or a shop somewhere and had saved money for a week's treat at the Golden Oak. She assumed he would order the cheapest thing on the menu and leave a small tip. Emma was having the worst day of her life, and she decided she did not have the energy to be nice to someone who would not help her pay her bills. Table for one, she asked without looking at James directly. Her voice was flat and cold, very different from the warm greeting she usually gave customers. James smiled at her, and his voice was gentle when he answered, "Yes, please. Thank you very much." Emma noticed that he spoke well and seemed educated, but she had already made up her mind about him. She picked up a single menu and walked toward the back of the restaurant, where the tables were smaller and closer to the noisy kitchen. Even though there were many empty tables in the main dining area with views of the street, Emma chose to seat James at the worst table in the restaurant. She dropped the menu on the table without ceremony and turned to walk away immediately. She did not offer him water, bread, or a smile. She did not tell him about the daily specials or ask if he had been to the Golden Oak before. Emma simply walked away, leaving James sitting alone at the small table. Other waiters noticed Emma's behavior and looked at each other with surprise. Tom, who worked at the station next to hers, raised his eyebrows when he saw how rudely she had treated the new customer. Sarah, the hostess, frowned when she watched Emma ignore the basic rules of good service that the Golden Oak was famous for. But Emma did not care what her co-workers thought. She was having a terrible day, and she had decided that James was not worth her time or effort. She went to check on her other tables, forcing smiles for the customers who wore expensive clothes and jewelry. 5 minutes passed before James politely raised his hand to get Emma's attention. "Excuse me, could I please have some water?" he asked when she finally looked his way. Emma sighed loudly, as if he had asked her to climb a mountain. She took her time walking to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and carried it slowly back to his table. She set it down without a word, and started to walk away again. "Could I please order now?" James asked politely. Emma stopped and turned round, pulling out her small notebook. "What do you want?" she asked, not bothering to hide her impatience. James looked at the menu carefully and pointed to one of the more expensive dishes. "I would like the grilled salmon dinner, please." Emma rolled her eyes and looked at him with doubt. "Are you sure you can afford that?" she asked rudely, loud enough for other customers to hear. James looked surprised by Emma's rude question about the salmon dinner, but he kept his calm expression. "Yes, I think I can manage," he said with a small smile that showed no anger or hurt feelings. Emma wrote down his order with quick, angry movements of her pen. She did not ask him how he wanted his salmon cooked or what vegetables he preferred. She did not offer him an appetizer or suggest a wine that would go well with his meal. Instead, she walked away without another word, leaving James sitting alone at his small table near the kitchen. As the evening went on, Emma's behavior toward James became worse and worse. When the kitchen prepared his salmon dinner, Emma let it sit under the heat lamps for 10 minutes before bringing it to his table. The fish was dry and overcooked, and the vegetables were cold. Any good waitress would have apologized and offered to get a fresh plate from the kitchen. But Emma just set the plate down hard and walked away. She did not ask if everything looked good or if he needed anything else. She treated James as if he were invisible, as if he did not deserve the same respect as the other customers in the restaurant. James looked at his overcooked dinner and quietly began to eat. He did not complain or make a scene. He simply tried to enjoy what he could of the meal, cutting small pieces of the dry salmon and eating them slowly. When James raised his hand and asked politely for salt, Emma was standing just a few feet away, talking to another customer. She saw him clearly, but she turned her back and pretended she had not heard him. James waited patiently for several minutes before asking another waiter for help. Tom, the waiter at the next station, brought James the salt and pepper shakers with an apologetic smile. "Sorry about that," Tom whispered quietly. "Is everything else okay?" James nodded kindly. "Everything is fine. Thank you very much." But everything was not fine. And the other customers in the restaurant were beginning to notice Emma's terrible behavior. At a table near the window, an elderly man and woman watched Emma ignore James's requests for service. The old woman shook her head with disapproval and whispered to her husband about the poor treatment they were witnessing. At another table, a young mother and father tried to enjoy their dinner with their two small children, but they felt uncomfortable watching Emma be so rude to James. The mother kept glancing over at his table with concern, wondering if they should say something to help. Even the other waiters were embarrassed by Emma's behavior. They had worked with her for years and had never seen her treat a customer so badly. They whispered to each other during quiet moments, wondering what was wrong with Emma and why she was being so unprofessional. James finished as much of his cold, overcooked dinner as he could manage. He folded his napkin neatly and placed it beside his plate, then looked round the restaurant for Emma. When she finally walked past his table carrying drinks for another customer, he spoke to her in his quiet, polite voice. "Excuse me, miss." James said calmly, "Could I please speak with the manager?" Emma stopped walking so suddenly that she almost dropped the drinks she was carrying. Her face turned bright red with anger, and her eyes flashed with fury. She had been rude to James all evening, but now she felt insulted that he wanted to complain about her service. "What for?" Emma demanded loudly, her voice carrying across the quiet restaurant. The food not good enough for you. Other customers stopped their conversations and turned to look at Emma and James. The elderly couple at the window table stared with shock at Emma's outburst. The young family with children looked embarrassed and uncomfortable, as if they wanted to leave the restaurant immediately. James remained completely calm despite Emma's loud, angry voice. He did not raise his voice or show any anger in return. Instead, he spoke even more quietly than before, which made Emma's shouting seem even worse by comparison. "I just think there might be a misunderstanding," James replied softly. "I would like to discuss the service I received tonight." Emma's anger exploded like a balloon that had been filled with too much air. She was tired, stressed about money, and frustrated with her life. All of her bad feelings came pouring out at once, directed at this quiet man who had done nothing wrong. "There's no misunderstanding," Emma snapped, her voice echoing through the silent restaurant. "Maybe you should eat somewhere else if you're not happy here." The moment Emma finished shouting, the entire restaurant fell completely silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork and knife was set down quietly on plates. Every customer, every waiter, every person in the Golden Oak turned to stare at Emma and James. James sat quietly for a long moment, looking at Emma with eyes that showed no anger or hatred. He seemed to be thinking carefully about what to say next. Finally, he nodded slowly and spoke in a voice so gentle that everyone had to lean forward to hear him. "I understand," James said softly. "Could I please have my check?" Emma's hands were shaking as she walked to the computer and printed James's bill. She was still angry, but now she also felt embarrassed because everyone in the restaurant had heard her yelling. She brought the check back to James's table and slammed it down without looking at him. James picked up the bill and studied it carefully. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. To Emma's complete surprise, he counted out the exact amount for his meal and then added a 20% tip on top of it. Emma did not sleep well that night. She tossed and turned in her small bed, thinking about what had happened at the restaurant. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw James's kind face and heard his gentle voice saying, "I hope your day gets better." She felt ashamed of how she had treated him, but she also felt confused. Why had he been so nice to her when she had been so terrible to him? When her alarm clock rang at 7 in the morning, Emma felt tired and worried. She had to go to work, but she dreaded facing her coworkers. She knew they had all seen her yell at James, and she was embarrassed about her behavior. Emma put on her work uniform slowly, brushing her hair and trying to make herself look professional. The walk to the Golden Oak usually took Emma 15 minutes, but today she walked slowly, not wanting to arrive early. The morning was cold and grey, with thick clouds covering the sun. Emma pulled her thin jacket tighter round her shoulders and wondered if this day would be as difficult as yesterday. When Emma reached the restaurant, she noticed that all the lights were on even though they did not usually open until 11 o'clock. She used her key to enter through the back door and was surprised to hear voices coming from the main dining room. Usually, the restaurant was quiet in the morning, with only 1 or 2 people preparing for the lunch service. Emma hung up her jacket and walked toward the dining room to see what was happening. When she turned the corner, she saw something unusual. All of the restaurant staff were gathered together in the main dining area. There were the waiters, the cooks, the hostess, the bartender, and even the dishwashers. Everyone was standing in a group, looking toward the front of the room where Mr. Thompson, the general manager, was waiting to speak. Emma had worked at the Golden Oak for 3 years, and she had never seen all the staff gathered together like this except for the Christmas party. She felt nervous as she joined the group, standing at the back where she hoped no one would notice her. Thompson was a tall, thin man with grey hair who always wore expensive suits. He had been the manager of the Golden Oak for 10 years, and Emma had always respected him. He was fair to his employees and cared about the restaurant's reputation. Today, though, he looked more serious than usual, and his face showed that he had important news to share. Emma's stomach felt tight with. When restaurants had unexpected staff meetings, it usually meant bad news. Maybe the restaurant was losing money. Maybe they would have to close down. Maybe some people would lose their jobs. Emma thought about her unpaid rent and her mother's medicine, and she felt panic rising in her chest. Everyone, I have very important news to share with you today, Mr. Thompson announced in his clear, professional voice. The Golden Oak has been sold to a new owner. The staff began to whisper to each other with surprise and concern. Emma felt her heart beating faster. New owners always meant changes, and changes often meant that some employees would be let go. Emma had seen this happen at other restaurants where her friends worked. New owners liked to bring in their own people and get rid of the old staff. Now, I want everyone to stay calm. Mr. Thompson continued, raising his hand to quiet the worried whispers. Our new owner is a very successful businessman here in Manchester. He has an excellent reputation in the community, and I believe this change will be good for all of us. Emma tried to feel hopeful, but she was still worried. She had been rude to a customer just yesterday, and if the new owner found out about her behavior, she would probably be fired immediately. She needed this job desperately, and she could not afford to lose it now. The new owner will be visiting us today to meet the staff and discuss his plans for the restaurant, Mr. Thompson said. He should be arriving any minute now, and I want everyone on their absolute best behavior. This is very important for all of our futures here. Emma felt sweat on her forehead despite the cool morning air. She tried to stand up straight and look professional, but her hands were shaking with nervousness. I want you all to know that our new owner is well known throughout Manchester for his charity work and business success, Mr. Thompson continued, with pride in his voice. He has built several successful companies and has donated millions of pounds to local schools and charities. We are very fortunate that he has chosen to invest in the Golden Oak, just as Mr. Thompson finished speaking. Emma heard the sound of the front door opening. Everyone turned to look toward the entrance, eager to see their new boss for the first time. Emma stood on her toes to see over the heads of her co-workers, curious about what kind of person had bought the restaurant. What Emma saw made her feel as if the floor had dropped out from under her feet. Walking through the front door with confident steps was James, the same man she had treated so terribly the night before. But today, he looked completely different. He wore a perfectly fitted dark blue suit that probably cost more than Emma made in 3 months. His shoes were polished leather that reflected the restaurant lights. He carried himself with a quiet confidence of someone who was used to being in charge and being respected. Emma's hands began to shake so badly that she had to clasp them together to make them stop. Emma's mouth felt completely dry as she watched James walk confidently into the dining room. Her heart was beating so fast that she was sure everyone round her could hear it. She wanted to run away, to disappear, to be anywhere else in the world, except standing in this room facing the man she had treated so terribly just 1 day ago. James walked straight to Mr. Thompson and shook his hand warmly. The two men spoke quietly for a moment, and then Mr. Thompson stepped forward to address the staff again. Everyone, I am very pleased to introduce you to Mr. James Harrison, Mr. Thompson said with a big smile. He is the new owner of the Golden Oak restaurant. The staff began to clap politely, but Emma could not move her hands. She felt frozen in place, watching James as he smiled and nodded to acknowledge the welcome. He looked so different from yesterday, in his expensive suit, with his confident posture and warm smile. He looked like exactly what he was, a successful businessman who owned companies and donated money to help people in need. Emma realized with horror that she had completely misjudged James based on his simple clothes and old shoes she had seen. What she expected to see instead of looking at who he really was. She had treated a good, successful, generous man like he was worthless, and now that man was her boss. James stepped forward and began to speak to the gathered staff. His voice was the same gentle, kind voice that Emma remembered from the night before, but now she could hear the confidence and authority in it as well. "Thank you all for the warm welcome," James said, looking round the room at each employee. "I want you to know why I decided to buy the Golden Oak. I believe that great restaurants are built on one simple idea: treating every single customer with dignity and respect, no matter who they are or where they come from." Emma felt each word hit her heart like a sharp knife. She knew that James was not just talking to the staff in general. He was talking directly to her about what had happened the night before. She felt her face burning with shame as she remembered how she had treated him. "I want to share something personal with all of you," James continued, his voice becoming softer and more emotional. "I grew up very poor in Birmingham. My family did not have much money at all. When I was young, I remember going to nice restaurants and shops with my mother, and I remember being treated badly by the people who worked there just because of how I looked or what clothes I wore." The restaurant staff listened carefully too. Every word James said, Emma could see that her co-workers were moved by his honesty and openness. But Emma felt sick to her stomach as she realized that she had done exactly the same thing to James that had hurt him when he was young. Being treated badly in those places hurt me deeply, James said, his voice showing the pain he still felt from those old memories. But those experiences also taught me something very important. How we treat other people shows who we really are inside. It shows what kind of person we choose to be. Emma wanted to cry. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to go back in time and change everything about how she had behaved the night before. But she could only stand there and listen as James continued to speak. "I worked very hard to build my business from nothing," James told the staff. "It took me many years of long days and difficult times, but as my companies grew and I became more successful, I always remembered how it felt to be treated poorly. I promised myself that I would always try to help other people and treat everyone with kindness." Emma learned that James owned Harrison Industries, a company that employed hundreds of people in Manchester. She learned that he had donated over £2 million to local schools to help children get better educations. She learned that he volunteered at homeless shelters and food banks, helping people who had very little money. People like Emma herself. "I want the Golden Oak to be a place where everyone feels welcome," James said, finishing his speech. "Rich or poor, young or old, no matter what they look like or where they come from. That is how we will build something truly special here. That is how we will make this restaurant a place that makes our community proud." The staff clapped again, and this time Emma managed to clap too, even though her hands were shaking. After James finished speaking, the employees began to return to their workstations to prepare for the lunch service. Emma hoped she could slip away quietly and avoid talking to James directly. But as the crowd of workers began to break up, James looked directly at Emma across the room. Their eyes met for just a moment, and Emma saw no anger or hatred in his expression. Instead, she saw the same kindness that had confused her the night before. "Emma," James said quietly, walking toward her, "could I please speak with you privately for a few minutes?" Emma's legs felt weak and unsteady as she nodded and followed James toward Mr. Thompson's office. She was sure that she was about to be fired, and she deserved it. She had been terrible to James. And now he had every right to send her away from the Golden Oak forever. James held the office door open for Emma, then closed it gently behind him. The small office felt very quiet after the noise and activity of the dining room. Emma stood near the door, afraid to sit down, afraid to look at James directly. "Emma," James said in his gentle voice, "I think we need to talk about what happened last night." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she looked at James across the small office. She had expected him to be angry with her. She had expected him to shout at her the way she had shouted at him. Instead, he was sitting calmly in his chair, waiting for her to speak. "Mr. Harrison," Emma said through her tears, "I am so very sorry for how I treated you last night. I was completely wrong, and I know there is no excuse for my behavior. I understand if you want to fire me right now." James watched Emma carefully as she spoke. He could see that her tears were real and that she truly felt bad about what had happened. But he also knew that feeling sorry was not enough. Real change required more than just an apology. "Tell me, Emma," James said gently, "what was happening in your life yesterday that made you act that way toward me?" Emma was surprised by his question. She had expected James to be angry with her, not interested in understanding her problems. She wiped her eyes with a tissue and tried to explain. "I have been having a very difficult time lately," Emma said quietly. "My rent is 3 weeks late, and my landlord keeps calling me. My mother is sick and needs expensive medicine that she cannot afford. I have been working 6 days a week, sometimes 7, trying to make enough money to help her and pay my bills." James listened without interrupting as Emma told him about her struggles. She explained how tired and frustrated she had felt, how worried she was about money, and how that worry had made her bitter and angry. "I see," James said when Emma finished speaking. "You were in pain, so you passed that pain to someone else. You took your anger and frustration out to me because you thought I was an easy target." Emma nodded, feeling ashamed. "Yes, that is exactly what I did. But Mr. Harrison, that is exactly when we need to be most careful about how we treat people. When we are hurting, that is when we most need to choose kindness instead of cruelty." James was impressed that Emma understood this important lesson. Many people never learned that their own pain was not an excuse to hurt others. "Emma," James said, leaning forward in his chair, "I am going to give you a choice. You can leave the Golden Oak today with a good reference from me. And I will not tell anyone about what happened last night. Or you can stay here and learn from this experience. But if you choose to stay, things have to change completely. You will have to work hard to become a better person and a better waitress." Emma wiped her tears and looked directly at James for the first time since entering the office. She saw kindness in his eyes, but also strength and determination. "I want to stay, Mr. Harrison," Emma said firmly. "I want to be better than I was. Yesterday, I was wrong to judge you based on your clothes and appearance. I am truly sorry, not just because you are my boss now, but because what I did was wrong and hurtful." James nodded slowly, studying Emma's face to see if she really meant what she was saying. After a long moment, he smiled slightly. "I believe you mean that, Emma," he said. "Here is what we are going to do. I am going to help you understand why treating people with respect and dignity matters so much. And you are going to help me make sure that every single customer who comes into the Golden Oak feels valued and welcome." Over the next few months, something wonderful happened to Emma. James became her mentor and teacher, helping her understand things she had never thought about before. He taught her about the impact of prejudice and assumptions. He shared stories from his own life about times when people had judged him unfairly. And he showed her how those experiences had motivated him to treat others with kindness. James explained to Emma that success in life comes not from putting other people down, but from lifting them up. He taught her that every person who walked through the restaurant doors had a story, had struggles, had feelings that could be hurt or helped by how she treated them. Emma worked harder than she had ever worked before, not just at her job, but at becoming a better person. She studied how the other waiters treated customers with respect. She practiced greeting people with genuine warmth. She learned to see each customer as a human being worthy of dignity, regardless of how they looked or what they wore. Slowly, Emma transformed completely. She became known as the best server at the Golden Oak, the one who could make any customer feel special and welcome. She learned to look past appearances and see the person underneath. She discovered that when she treated people with kindness, they almost always responded with kindness in return. Emma also learned about James's life and work outside the restaurant. She discovered that he spent much of his free time volunteering at homeless shelters and food banks. He donated money to help families pay for medical expenses, just like Emma's mother needed. He created scholarships to help young people go to college who could not otherwise afford it. 6 months after that terrible night when Emma had treated James so poorly, she was working her evening shift when Mr. Thompson handed her an envelope. "This came for you today," he said with a mysterious smile. Emma opened the envelope and found a letter from James along with an application for a scholarship to Manchester Teaching College. Her hands began to shake as she read James's words. "Emma," the letter said, "you have shown me and everyone at the Golden Oak that people can truly change when they open their hearts and choose to grow. This scholarship is for people who want to make a positive difference in the world. I believe you are ready to do exactly that." The end.